looking for escapism, I just want to escape.
Welcome back to my disembodied voice. If you're a fan of the movies like me, then you will no doubt have memories of some of the best villains ever put to celluloid. Whether you love romance, comedies, horror, or a good old-fashioned thriller, there will be one thing which you can remember, and that is the villain of the story. Quite simply, and the reason why so many actors and actresses sign up for projects is that the villain is often the most fun part to play and the most vivid and talked about character long after you have left the movie theatre or turned off the television. However, as we now live in a hyper-expressed world where the literal meaning of literally has, like, literally been removed from modern day lexicon, people band around words like psychopath and sociopath with very little context to why they are using those words, apart from the fact that it sounds good. And the reason both of these words feel good to say and sound dynamically captivating is the connotations which come from them. Every word has a connotative meaning, and it's what we attach when we're reading books, attending a lecture, or if you're watching a movie and Dr. Chilton is cast in a demonic red light with a smile on his face and he states, "Hannibal is a pure psychopath." It creates a real sense of instant dread, excitement and foreboding, and builds up the character we're about to meet. But why do the words sociopath and psychopath have such resonance? Well, in terms of the English language, they are apex words, which have one immediate definition but a litany of the worst connotations. We know that a psychopath is dangerous and evil, but we also know they'll be cold-blooded, calculating, nasty, ruthless, immoral, offensive, sadistic, and so on. But rather than say, "Oh, Hannibal is a nasty, ruthless, calculating, offensive," we just use the pejorative word of psychopath because it contains every connotation and stereotype in our minds. If I said to you, now pitching my movie, you need to see my movie as the lead villain is a total antisocial, or check out my movie, the villain is mad, or see my movie, I'll tell you what, I've made it, it's brilliant, the villain's so ruthless, then you might be interested. However, the context and meaning of antisocial, say, doesn't really spark any neurological processes which will conjure up any immediate images. So when I say, "Oh, my villain's antisocial," you might have images of someone spitting, dropping litter, wearing a hoodie, beating someone, or, if your mind works differently, stabbing someone, just being generally offensive, or whatever. However, if I say, "You've got to see the movie I've made, villain's a complete psychopath," straight away your opinion is already formed by the connotative associations to that specific appellation. And immediately, if someone says to you, psychopath, you can picture villains and characteristics which are either exciting or scary, as the word psychopath is a denominating lexeme which your synapses can immediately recall, use memory, assumption and expectation all together from your cerebral cortex to place an image inside your head. But what is a psychopath and what is a sociopath? Now, you might listen to a drunk girl at a party,
"Wow, and you're just gonna do the voice,"
who states that her ex was a total sociopath. But deep down, is that label an overgeneralization? What does it mean? And when it comes to the literal definition and depth of a psychopath or sociopath, what are the differences? Where does the disorder start? And how can it truly be classified? So for today's video, join me as we separate the psychopath from the sociopath and look at how they've been portrayed in two contrasting films, which are going to be The Hand That Rocks the Cradle and We Need to Talk About Kevin, and see the subtleties and differences which make up these miscreants of society. Oh, and psychopaths and sociopaths aren't always villains. In a future video, I'm going to look at Casino Royale and talk about the presentation of James Bond in that particular movie. But for today's movie, we're going to stick with villains and look at the differences. Otherwise, our video is just going to be way too long. Right then, Let's crack on and start at the beginning. In order to truly start at the beginning, we have to look at the spectrum of antisocial personality disorder. Now, antisocial personality disorder is believed to start at the age of 8 years old, but crucially, as it cannot be officially diagnosed at that age, it would be diagnosed as conduct disorder. However, let's go even further back to the earlier and more formative years, age 6 or younger to be precise, to the entry level of the spectrum of antisocial personality disorder into something called oppositional defiant disorder. According to Johns Hopkins Medicine, oppositional defiant disorder is a type of behaviour disorder. Children with oppositional defiant disorder are uncooperative, defiant, and hostile towards peers, parents, teachers, and authority figures. Developmental problems may cause oppositional defiant disorder, or the behaviours may be learned. A child with oppositional defiant disorder may argue a lot with adults or refuse to do what they ask. He or she may also be unkind to others. Able to be treated with counselling and medication similar to what is given to children with ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder is not a sign that the child is going to be a psychopath. However, once the age of 8 is reached and the behaviour has deteriorated from burly and surly challenges to authority, and there are now traces of aggression, criminal damage, and other actions, a diagnosis of conduct disorder can be made. And conduct disorder has 4 major symptoms present: physical aggression, such as cruelty towards animals, assault, or rape; violating others' rights, such as theft or vandalism; lying or manipulation; delinquent behaviours, such as truancy or running away from home. Now, upon reaching the age of 18, if there is still symptomology present, then conduct disorder migrates to antisocial personality disorder. Now, the NHS in my country defines antisocial personality disorder as: antisocial personality disorder is a particularly challenging type of personality disorder characterised by impulsive, irresponsible, and often criminal behaviour. Someone with antisocial personality disorder will typically be manipulative, deceitful, and reckless, and will not care for other people's feelings. Like other types of personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder is on a spectrum, which means it can range in severity from occasional bad behaviour to repeatedly breaking the law and committing serious crimes. And personality disorder expert Theodore Millen stated that the following are symptoms of antisocial personality disorder: a disregard for right and wrong, using charm or wit to manipulate others, having issues with the law, seeming arrogant or superior, violating the physical or emotional rights of others, lacking a home or job stability, demonstrating irritable, aggressive, or violent behaviour, a lack of remorse for any wrongdoing, being constantly irresponsible, engaging in reckless or impulsive behaviour, acting deceitful, having poor or abusive relationships, having childhood behavioural problems such as a diagnosis of conduct disorder. Now, according to the criteria of the DSM-5, you need 4 of the following list to be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Number 1, failure to obey laws and norms by engaging in behaviour which results in a criminal arrest or would warrant a criminal arrest. Number 2, lying, deception and manipulation for profit or self-amusement. Number 3, impulsive behaviour. Number 4, irritability and aggression manifested as frequent assaults on others or engaging in fighting. Number 5, blatantly disregards safety of self and others. Number 6, a pattern of irresponsibility and a lack of remorse for their actions. Also, one needs to be 18 years old, have had conduct disorder at the age of 15, and the behaviour must not be part of an Axis 1 mental health condition such as schizophrenia or bipolar. Millen also argued there are several reasons why people can become antisocial, and these were interpersonal, friendships, family, risk factors, relationships, growing up, and environments which are not conducive to the individual. Cognitive, beliefs, expectations, aspirations, appraisals, and the unique way an individual can interpret their world, or in other words, their phenomenal field of reality. Biological, deficits with the brain upon birth, or an injury from some kind of head trauma, or general reasons why the brain structure has problems with temperament, hormonal and neurotransmitter patterns. And finally, the psychodynamic perspective. Childhood, an amalgamation of the above factors and an introjection of experience growing up. Basically, antisocial personality disorder is a complex beast which doesn't just mean one thing and, through medication and counselling, can be altered and changed. Drug use, rewards from acting out, alcohol, unresolved trauma, and many other factors contribute towards antisocial personality disorder, and existing on a continuum which is not too dissimilar in distance from narcissistic personality disorder. Antisocial personality disorder, according again to personality disorder expert Theodore Millen, has 5 subtypes: the nomadic antisocial, the malevolent antisocial, the covetous antisocial, the risk-taking antisocial, and the reputation-defending antisocial. Now, antisocial people can form relationships, are treatable, and have problems with aggression, acting out, self-control, and respecting the rights of others. But psychopaths and sociopaths are littered at the far end of the continuum and are the extreme measures of antisocial personality disorder. Psychopaths are resistant to chaos and have severe biological deficits in the medial prefrontal cortex and frontal lobe processing, and also in the amygdala, which deals with our fight and flight. Basically, they lack the empathy and understanding of emotions, and yet they themselves are emotionally deficient and do not feel remorse or fear in the same way that a normal brain structure would. Sociopaths are different, often shaped by experience, needing much more stimulation and having more of a temper. They do not blend into society like the lizard in a skin suit psychopath does, but they also can have certain changes in their brain chemistry. Okay, but what are psychopaths' main traits and how do they differ from sociopaths? Psychopath: lack of guilt, remorse or empathy, pretending to feel emotions, inability to form true emotional attachments, tend to be successful, dishonest, manipulative behaviour, superficial charm, and narcissism. So, as much of this comes from biological brain deficits, the psychopath may well have antisocial personality disorder tendencies of cruelty and aggression, but there's no rehabilitation to be had here. Far too distant at the end of the spectrum with severe neurological deficits, the psychopath doesn't understand humans because they kind of aren't human at all. If I were to take away your conscience, morals, fear, social conventions and understanding away, and I mean I was to suck them out of your brain chemistry or somewhat damage your frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex and fight or flight areas such as the amygdala, what is left isn't you. It's more of an empty version of you because the parts of the brain which used to work don't work anymore. Therefore, even if you had oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder before, there is no rehabilitation to be had because you don't have the biology to have things programmed inside you like decency, emotivity, fear, respect and love. So when we say psychopath, the literal, like literally literal definition is someone who doesn't feel, is on the continuum of antisocial, but cannot process the fundamental emotions which you and I take for granted. Okay, the sociopath. Lack of remorse, but guilt and empathy is present in some cases. Some emotions are felt, but they are shallow and fleeting, such as rage. May form close attachments to individuals. Consistent and irresponsible violations of the law. Constant lying and deception. Aggressive and reckless behaviour. The sociopath remains a more pure variant of the antisocial personality disorder. They have poorer impulse control compared to the psychopath's patients and are generally content to be unstimulated, but are more prone to lashing out and getting angry. One of the main differences here is that our sociopath can pretend to care, form some relationships, may love someone in some kind of a way which resembles love, but has more of a tendency to have physical fights, express rage, and has less tolerance for boredom. Their brains are still affected by impairments to the amygdala and so forth, and their prefrontal cortex and frontal lobes are also impaired, and thus an inhibited impulse control is there. But they can form variations of attachment and have feelings where psychopaths cannot. Okay, so now we come to our two movie villains, and let's see how they can be classified as a psychopath and a sociopath. And, as stated before, today's video, we're going to look at Rebecca De Mornay from the 1992 film The Hand That Rocks the Cradle for our sociopath, and for our psychopath, we're going to look at Ezra Miller's Kevin from the movie We Need to Talk About Kevin. Okay, so Rebecca De Mornay plays Peyton Flanders.
Dun diddly doodly, dun diddly doodly.
No, not that one. But her real name is Mrs. Mott, and using the alias of Flanders...
Dun diddly doodly, dun diddly doodly.
I said no. After her husband killed himself, she uses this pseudonym to infiltrate the female protagonist Claire Bartel's home, who is played by Annabelle Sciorra. Okay, so Flanders moves into the Bartel house for her 3-course meal of a dish best served cold. So let's look at some of her sociopathy traits and how Flanders fits into them. Now, it's worth noting that Flanders moves to the Bartel house, as mentioned, for revenge, and we don't see the relationship with her husband prior. So, although there could have been problems with that, and I will touch on that later, we're going to focus on how she then targets the family and her mind works. Number 1, makes it clear that she does not care how others feel. Peyton Flanders spends much of the film treating people as objects and a means to an end, and when she ultimately reveals herself to anyone, be it mocking Claire for an asthma attack or simply revealing her anger, Flanders has no conscience towards others. Number 2, behaves in hot-headed and impulsive ways. Be it losing her temper in private or killing someone in a greenhouse, there is both calculation in Flanders' head, but also a lot of impulsivity where she will either attack, berate, or ruin others with little more than instinct. Far from being patient and calculating when sometimes this would be best, Flanders has all the facets sociopaths are afflicted with, and her temper and impulsivity comes out. Number 3, prone to fits of anger and rage. Take the scene where she trashes the toilet stall, and this is everything you need to know about the temperament, rage and anger of this woman. Like those on the antisocial continuum, the poor impulse control isn't just for reckless behaviour, it manifests in anger and rage too. Number 4, recognise what they are doing but rationalise their behaviour. Flanders is looking to replace the child she can now never have with her deceased husband by taking the Bartel baby. Now, this is insanity and very much a sign of severe trauma or possibly mental illness, but the lack of conscience in her actions and the beliefs that the children see her as the mother now are sociopathic defence mechanisms to rationalise what she is doing and compartmentalise it as understandable despite the sheer madness of the spiralling situation. Number 5, conform emotional attachments, but these are difficult. As I said before, she has a relationship with her husband, but we don't know much about this relationship as the film starts with the molestation and then suicide of Mr. Mott. But more than likely, there were huge deficits in their relationship from the start. Also, once Mott dies and the primary motivation of falling pregnant collapses, we get a peek behind the mask as we see the rage, selfishness, anger, impulsivity and sheer lack of regard for others now unfettered by the situation which shackled it before. Make no doubt, Flanders, or Mrs. Mott, would have shown this during her marriage, but maybe that belief in the relationship, that convention, that type of feeling we taught sociopaths can form, prevented this kind of outburst. The point here is that, much like my video where I talked about the Sociopath in the House of Wax remake, Flanders has relationships, albeit superficial and manipulative, but her anger, boredom, blatant disregard for others, and hot-headed decisions which have devastating consequences are all signs of sociopathy. However, when we come to Kevin from We Need to Talk About Kevin, we're dealing with someone very different. There is no doubt that from his behaviour as a baby through to the mutilation of his sister, which we don't see in the film but is alluded to more graphically in the book, and right through to the eventual massacre at the school, which he performs with his archery bow, Kevin is a cold, hard psychopath who, far from having any sign of Axis 3 social stresses affecting him, as he comes from a loving home and experiences no trauma, or, more crucially, he doesn't experience the grief of loss that Rebecca de Mornay's Flanders does, he maintains his rage behind a near, controlled and reptilian facade. Kevin doesn't have the impulse control problems or ability to form attachments to fellow humans, albeit strained, that Peyton Flanders does. Instead, throughout his life of delayed milestones, sexually inappropriate behaviour towards his mother, difficulties moving past the anal stage of childhood development, sadism over his sister's eye being destroyed by cleaning fluid, all the way through to a massive body count inside a school massacre, he is aloof, cruel, detached, and almost obliviously confused to this thing called emotional attachment and understanding how people work. So let's look at some facets of psychopathy which explain how Kevin's brain does or doesn't work. By the way, if you haven't read the book We Need to Talk About Kevin, check it out. Written entirely in letters to her deceased husband, it's a brilliant portrayal of a mother who does everything she can to keep loving the monster she birthed and who has left her with the vicarious responsibility for the deaths of her loved ones and also multiple people at school. Number 1. Pretends to care. Kevin is such a cold-hearted bastard in this film that any genuine moments are few and far between, but his relationship with his father, which he pretends to be close to, is one less of devotion, more of a screw you to his mother. Possessing a real hatred towards Tilda Swinton, he bonds with his father, except this isn't really a bond. It's a facade which leads him to drive his mother up the wall by gaslighting behaviour, and it ends in tragedy when he slaughters both father and sister and leaves the woman he truly despises with all the guilt and loneliness in the world. Number 2. Displays cold-hearted behaviour. Kevin slaughters children and adults alike, but perhaps the most obvious sign of his evil and cold-hearted behaviour is when he pours caustic drain cleaner into his sister's eye. Spared the graphic details of such mutilation in the film, the scene is reduced to Kevin smirking while grossly eating lychees. Now, the book gives more detail, but either way, there is zero empathy or remorse or even understanding of the heinous crime he's committed or the awful trauma he has caused his young sister by melting her eyeball. Number 3. Fails to recognise other people's distress. Upon being caught masturbating by his horrified mother, Kevin merely continues to keep whacking his pickle all the more, and he seems to be enjoying the fact that his mother is mortified and upset by it. For many of us, this will be the height of embarrassment, but for Kevin, the notion of embarrassment or basic neurological comprehension of someone's distress isn't present. So therefore, although he's using it to wind his mother up, tease her, and kind of psychologically abuse her, he doesn't have the understanding that being caught masturbating isn't something that you should be proud of. Number 4. Has relationships which are shallow or fake. Again, coming back to his father, the relationship is one way, shallow, fake, and pure subterfuge. Unable to bond with the children at high school and locked in a perpetual dance of destruction with his mother, Kevin's relationship with his dad, as stated above, is purely to gaslight his mother's low self-esteem and accentuate the feelings she has about her own poor parenting. Throughout the film, Tilda Swinton talks about how she never bonded with him and she blames herself. And Kevin knows this. So the relationship with his dad is nothing at all apart from a big, screw you mother, he's great, you're not. Except he doesn't love his father. He kills him in cold blood at the end. There's no remorse, there's nothing. Make no mistake, Kevin hates his dad as much as his mom, but maybe he hates his mom a little bit more. Number 5. Maintains a normal life for covert reasons that cover more insidious intentions. Kevin attends high school, functions as best as he can and trains hard at his archery. Yet, in the table scene after Cecilia's eye injury, Tilda Swinton sees the true monster who eats noisily, whilst Dad is in a different dimension of psychological understanding, and this is where Kevin's psychopathy shines. He plans to kill his cohorts, teachers, father and sister, and in order to maintain this facade, because his programming knows how people work and what makes them happy, even though he can't feel that himself, kind of like a child which knows what buttons to press to make a video game work, Kevin simply imitates normality so he can reach his final crescendo of slaughter. It's all planned, it's all in his head, but he can't just go and do it, and the clever psychopath knows that. So he imitates, forms a plan, strategizes, trains, narrows everything down to the point where he can cause the most amazing damage possible, all whilst maintaining a facade of a normal, boring boy. Number 6, fails to form genuine emotional attachments. Now, psychopaths' brains have smaller amygdala, differences in connections from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, and the orbifrontal cortex and limbic system are both switched off. Grey matter is also missing between the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and anterior cingulate gyrus. All of this basically means they don't recognise simple visual or emotional cues, and this is obvious for Kevin. He despises his mother, treats his sister as an object, and is unmoved by the damage he causes to her eye, and when it comes to his dad, he only really bonds with him over the bow and arrow because this is something, a vehicle if you will, which gives him power and the ultimate ability to enact his fantasy of a school massacre. Also, as he fully intends to kill his dad with the bow and arrow, it's also another kind of screw you. You think we're bonding, you think I love you. Well, I'm going to kill you with this thing and I don't care. A loner throughout his childhood, disinterested by girls and friends, he can fake interest in people or pretend to care, but at the end of the day, no matter the horror which surrounds him, Kevin is a jigsaw piece whose edges don't fit with other people, and he remains an odd creature throughout who doesn't even try to love or attach to anyone through childhood or his adolescence. So, although psychopaths are more biologically made than sociopaths, their chemistry, social outlooks and nuances are subtle but different enough to show two contrasting levels of functioning and intent. And whilst movies embellish and accentuate certain facets for entertainment, both Flanders and Kevin are good examples of pure patterned sociopaths and psychopaths. And, as stated at the start, both sociopath and psychopaths are on the continuum of antisocial personality disorder, and when crafting these on screen, the context, nuance and respect of that particular disorder always need to be respected, because as humans, you don't have to be a psychologist to recognise flawed, wrong, incongruent or blatant signs of presentation and behaviour which you know is not pro-social, or certainly indicative of something insidious. It's what makes movies so great, the fact that we can see the tics, tricks and cracks in the behaviour, presentation and psychology of characters that the other characters cannot see, and we feel that familiar crawl in our skin that this person's wrong and there's something about them that just unnerves us. It's a natural inbuilt defence mechanism for all of us. When something is dangerous, we kind of sense it. Our hairs prickle up, our brains go, hang on, that ain't right. And it's brilliant. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed our little dive into this topic, and that's it for this week's video. So remember that psychology is cool. Please like, share and subscribe, and even leave a comment, as they always generate good debate. And as ever, until we meet again, or basically, until next time, I'll catch you later.
People like me